In the next chapter, I want to cover another very common type of shot, and that is a tripod shot. So let's have a look at this. Seems to be very easy. Very slow camera movement. Actually, there's no movement at all. It's just rotating around one point. So that's why it is also referred to as a nodal pan, because it's just standing on a node and rotating, panning around. And while that may seem to be very easy, it's actually not that easy. Because when you do not have any perspective shift, because the camera doesn't change its location, but it's just staying on one point, there is no perspective shift, and that makes it very hard or even impossible to create a 3D solution for that. So the only information that SynthEyes will be able to extract from this shot is just the rotation and not a 3D environment. So let's go to SynthEyes and open that shot. Of course, I've already prepared that as an image sequence. Okay, NTSC. So that's our shot. And maybe let's just try and see what happens if we press that auto button. Alright, and you can see it's calculating. And it's not particularly fast. You can see it has to do some calculations here in the end of the shot. So there seems to be some problems. And you can already see there have been some trackers that have been set to far with a reduced weight. So we know there's a problem. And if you hit OK, then you can see this looks not really like that what we see here. And if you have a look at these circular shaped trackers, they should be matching to that architecture here, but apparently they are not. So even though that really can't be right, we have a rather low error value. So you can also see the error value is more a guideline and is not really exact value if your scene is good or not, because this is obviously not right. Okay, maybe let's just delete these trackers. You know, they don't seem to be right, something's wrong. Maybe we can have something better here. So maybe let's just resolve. Still not very fast. Some calculations. Alright, and again, that can't be right. Go. Okay, and now we have an even lower error value, but the solution is total crap. This is just completely unusable. So you see, we have to do things differently. Now let's just delete everything here and come back to the summary panel and enable the on tripod setting. Because if we tell SynthEyes beforehand that this has been shot on a tripod, it can handle all these features differently and will know how to handle the whole scene. So let's hit the auto button again. Computing blips, of course, will take a while, but when that is done, you can see how fast that was. So that was very fast. Error value is higher than before, but now we have just this curved shape here. So all these trackers do not refer to the actual geometry, but they are just telling SynthEyes how the camera has been rotating. Now, still there might be some errors because jumping features can happen all the time on tripod or normal shot. So maybe we'll just hit the Shift C, clean up trackers, maybe reduce that value, increase that threshold, also fix bad frames. Fix bare trackers, solve again. Alright, even lower. So we probably do have a pretty good tripod solution now, even though we cannot tell where all these trackers have been. So this shape is very typical for a tripod shot. Okay, now let's see what happens if we insert a 3D object. So let's just create a box here. And you can see this is not on the ground. This is rotated in a very weird way. But still, if we play that back, it stays there perfectly. So we have no sliding, no shifting, no nothing. It really stays there, however, not on the ground. So we know the solution is already quite good, but we have to rotate the scene in order to be able to work with that in a way that makes sense. So let's come back to the quad view, and of course we can now go ahead and enable whole, switch to our rotation tool, and then start rotating the camera and hopefully be able to find a matching solution for that, so that we have that box lying on the ground. But you can imagine this could be very tedious. Although I think I already did a pretty good job of that. But still, you don't know where does that building start and all that stuff. So where is the origin of the scene? Is it really on the ground and all these things? So it might not be ideal to do all that manually. Now luckily there's a way for us to calculate the orientation of the camera in that scene. And let's first delete that box and now come to the lens panel, but instead of calculating lens distortion, we can now add lines in the scene that will help us to orient the camera. So when you click here on the Add Line button, you can now insert lines that are fitting to that architecture, and thereby you can create a 3D camera solution. And for that you do need two lines that define your origin. In this case it's pretty obvious that we can use the Z-axis just by clicking here, then dragging upwards so that we can define this corner of that building to define the Z-axis. To do that, we first create that line, and when we release the mouse, then we can tell SynthEyes that this line is on the Z-axis. And after that, we can now zoom in and maybe refine that a bit more, because you have to really be careful to try to match the exact axis. Okay, that looks good, but not here. So click here, drag, and then try to go on the ground, maybe a little bit lower than that because we have some debris on the floor. So we can go maybe here. Okay, that should do the job. And now we want to create the next line, maybe the X-axis. So this button is still enabled. We can click here and then try to create that axis, and of course that X-axis has to be exactly starting on that point. But if you click here, oh, now you're rotating on and moving that Z-axis again. So it can be very problematic to hit that origin, but there's a trick. You can just start here on the opposite side of that X-axis, click and drag here to that origin, then let go. Say it's on the X-axis, and now we can come here and switch the direction so that these two lines are now pointing away from the origin. And then make sure it is really here on that axis. And I think this floor is not really straight, it's going a bit down, so I would say we have to come a little bit higher here, maybe like that. So in this case it's not very easy to match that, really that axis point. That should do the job. And we can now go ahead and maybe help SynthEyes a bit more by inserting a new line that will be parallel to the y-axis. And in this case, it doesn't matter in which direction this line is pointing. And we can help SynthEyes even more by creating a few more lines, maybe parallel to the x-axis, and another one parallel, then maybe a line that is parallel to the z-axis. We find that. Oops. Okay. Maybe one more on the y-axis here. I mean parallel to the y-axis, excuse me. Here. Alright. So now we could go ahead and calculate the solution. But before, I want to do one more thing, and that is to tell SynthEyes how long is that z-axis line, so that we know how big is that building here. So if we select that, we can come here and say on x-axis with length. Okay, problem is I don't really know how big is that building and how long would that be in meters, but if I'm just guessing, I would say, I don't know, 5 meters? Is that realistic? Let's just say it's 5 meters, so we say length is 5, or maybe 5.5, I don't know. And then press align. And now if you come back here to our quad view, you can see that SynthEyes has now placed that camera here on that point. We have to zoom in pretty far. And then we can go to the 3D Objects panel and insert a box to see if it really fits to that architecture. So we activate that box tool and then go here to the origin, click and drag, and you can see that it really does fit to the architecture. So let's also insert a box for that wall here. So click and drag, maybe until that doorway here. All right. So you can see that with alignment tools of SynthEyes, you can extract some usable 3D information even just out of a tripod shot. Now let's see if the size of our scene is reasonable. To do that, I want to insert an earthling, because that of course is the best reference. Then make him 1.8 meters and then see if that is reasonable. Maybe let's go to perspective view. For that you can just hit F3 and then bring him here to the entrance of that doorway, or maybe let's bring him over there. And you can see that our scene is probably a little bit too small compared to the size of that earthling here. So if you really want to be precise here, then go back to camera view by hitting F2. Go back to the lens panel, select that z-axis, go to the correct frame, which you can do by pressing at that button. And here, let's set the length to I don't know, 6 meters, 7. Then hit align, and that looks a lot better now. And the cool thing is, you can also do this with just a still image. So if you just want to insert some 3D objects inside a photo, then you can go ahead and load that. I've got that here, stills. There's this picture. All right. Maybe let's set it here full screen. Okay. So you can see we have that photo of this room here. And if you want to insert some 3D objects, then of course you can just by eyeballing that, you can place the camera in your 3D application. But just in case you get no satisfying solution from that, you can go ahead and add a line here, Maybe here for the y-axis. This is on the y-axis. Make sure it's really aligned properly. Right here. Then, just like before, we need the x-axis. So click here, drag until that origin. Let go. This is on the x-axis, but it is pointing in the wrong direction. So we come over here, switch that, and then also finally let's set up the z-axis also to that origin. And this is on the z-axis. Or maybe let's just set the length right from the beginning. So let's choose on the z-axis with length. Then here we can set it to, I don't know, 2 meters. Or maybe 2 meters and 20 centimeters. And maybe we can improve that even more just by adding another line that is parallel to the y-axis. And then also here, this is parallel to the x-axis, of course. This is parallel to the z-axis. Okay. And now we can go ahead and click Align. And there's an error. And the reason for that is I forgot to switch direction for the z-axis. So let's go ahead and do that here. And now click Align. And if you look at that from quad view, you can see we have our origin. This is our room. So if we go ahead and insert, let's just use that earthling here. Make him 1 meter and 8. So that looks more or less reasonable. I mean, the room could be a little bit bigger, but it's not too bad. Then we can insert the walls here. Also there, roughly like that. And if you happen to know the lens distortion of your camera, and I do, because I've shot with a wide angle lens, and by doing several tests I know that the lens distortion probably was somewhere around -0.1, somewhere around here. You can see that on the lens panel. Something like that maybe. And of course, now we have the lens distortion, and we could go ahead, lens workflow, undistorted, and boom, there we have straight lines in our image. And we do know the exact camera position. So that's very cool if you want to insert something inside a still image. With alignment tools and lens distortion, you can get a really good solution for that.